Hey everyone, welcome to this week's On the Road Again video. I hope you are having a good week and the sun is shining for you. Now, we've just booked our 10th trip for the beginning of 2025 to South Africa. So I thought in this video I would share with you 11 things that I wish I'd known 10 years ago when I first went to South Africa, and 5 travel do's and don'ts. So if you are planning a South African trip, whether that be to Cape Town or to the winelands, or maybe you're doing a safari, and I highly encourage you to plan a trip. It's obviously our favorite place on earth, but if you are planning a trip, I want to help you know the things that I wish I knew so that you have the most amazing adventure when you head out to South Africa. So let's get started and let's head out on the road again. Hi, we're James and Rob, and this is our dog Oscar. We love travel in all its forms, so join us on our next adventure as we head out on the road again. So as I said in the intro, we've just booked our 10th trip to South Africa for the beginning of next year. In fact, I'm going to be there for nearly 3 months, and I'll tell you more about that in a future video. But I thought, when I cast my mind back to 10 years ago, what are the things that I wish I knew? Because I didn't know anything about South Africa, just probably like you if you've never been. So I thought in this video, I actually ended up with 11, but I would share with you 11 things that I wish someone had told me when I was planning my first trip. And then I want to share with you 5 things that you absolutely should do and 5 things that you absolutely shouldn't do when you head out to South Africa. So let's get going. I've got my notes in front of me, and let me start off by saying that South Africa has 11 official languages, with English and Afrikaans being widely spoken. So you are going to hear all sorts of different languages when you are there, but don't worry, almost everybody speaks English in all the places that you're going to want to visit. But 11 languages shows you what a melting pot of cultures South Africa is, and that's one of the beauties of the country. So that is my first point, which is South Africa has 11 official languages, but don't worry, English is widely spoken, and you will hear that sort of Dutch sounding Afrikaans spoken in a lot of places as well. My second point is that South Africa is so much more than just doing a safari or just going to Cape Town. It's known for its vibrant nightlife, its amazing culture, of course its wildlife and its outdoor activities, and it is a super popular tourist destination. In fact, in 2023 it had 8.5 million tourists visit, which was a significant growth on the year before, and I only see that sort of post-pandemic continuing to rise as more people discover the beauty of South Africa. So that's my second point, which is South Africa is so much more than Cape Town or safari. So go and experience all the amazing outdoor things that you can do when you are there. My third point is that South Africa is a country that has a diverse range of landscapes, from pristine beaches to vast deserts and breathtaking mountain ranges. Of course, everyone knows South Africa for going on a safari, which you absolutely should do, or going to visit the mother city of Cape Town. But beyond that, there are absolutely beautiful places that we've been fortunate enough to visit, such as the Drakensberg Mountains or God's Window in Mpumalanga, and of course the winelands along the garden route. One of the things that we absolutely love about Cape Town is this massive amount of diversity. For example, if you are based in Cape Town, then you can obviously spend a day shopping and exploring all that the city has to offer. You can head down to Camps Bay and get a real kind of trendy Miami feel. You can head an hour north and you're going to hit the surfer kind of town, more laid back town of Langebaan. Or you can head 1.5 hours west, and you head up to the winelands of Franschhoek and Stellenbosch, and you can go hiking up Lion's Head if you're in Cape Town, of course Table Mountain as well. You can drive the beautiful Chapman's Peak towards Hout Bay, which is another stunning beach area, one of our favourite places. So the one thing is that if you are based in Cape Town, you don't have to go very far to experience very different kind of landscapes and different things depending on what you're interested in. And of course, if you're there for a week or two, then you absolutely must make sure that you visit all of those areas. So that's my third point, which is South Africa has a really diverse range of landscapes. And number 4 is that the best time to visit South Africa is in their summer. And of course, they're in the southern hemisphere, so their summer runs from around about November through to April. and the climate varies vastly across the country. But if you're down south in Cape Town, then you can expect their summer temperatures to be around 25 degrees, which is 87 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a fantastic consistent climate. And even in their winter, it can be fairly mild in the months of May to October. It just gets a bit grayer and rainy, but it doesn't get really cold like it does in the Northern Hemisphere. So one of the reasons we love South Africa so much is because of this beautiful climate. It's never too hot, it's not too humid, and it is really consistent weather. And I'm talking predominantly in the Western Cape down south. Of course, it's going to be hotter if you're heading up towards Johannesburg and the Kruger National Park to do a safari. It will be hotter there during the summer, but it's still a really pleasant climate. Number 5 is that the currency of South Africa is the rand. And if you are a Westerner like we are, then you're going to feel really wealthy because the exchange rate is about 23 rand to the pound as I record this, or 18 rand to the dollar. And just to give a bit of context here, if you go back 20 years or so, there used to be about 2 rand to the pound, and now there's 23, 24, even though at its peak. And so you can see that vast difference in the currencies. And that means that prices are typically a half to 2/3 of the price that you would expect to pay in the UK. So for example, if you're buying a coffee in a nice coffee shop, you're going to pay around about 30 to 35 rand, which is about £1.50 or $1.80. And a nice meal with wine is going to be around about 400 rand. So that is £17 or $21. So you can eat really well. And of course, the quality of food and obviously wine is absolutely amazing there. Now, talking of coffee, there is a really big coffee scene in South Africa with lots of local coffee shops and not a lot of big brands. They have a couple of kind of chain coffee shops, Bootlegger and Mug and Bean, which are both great, but go try one of the local coffee shops and you can get some really great artisan coffee, plus you're going to get great pastries and food as well. The last point on number 5 is that credit cards are accepted everywhere. In fact, South Africa is more advanced in some respects, even though it's not a first world country. So one thing I really like is that in a lot of places, when you tap your credit card, you have to let it beep twice before the transaction happens. And this is for a security perspective, so that if someone walked by your pocket and tried to have their own kind of zapper, it wouldn't work because it has to beep twice. So you hold your card there till it's twice. So credit cards, all our Western credit cards are accepted, MasterCard and Visa and American Express, in a lot of places. So you don't really need a ton of cash. We really don't have a lot of cash. We take a little bit with us for tipping, but otherwise you don't really need it. Number 6, carrying on from this conversation, is that the food in South Africa is absolutely amazing. It's some of the best quality food and service at an exceptionally reasonable price that we've eaten anywhere in the world. And partly this is because it's a melting pot of cultures. So don't just try the tried and tested things that you're used to, but do try some of the local foods as well while you are there, because we have very rarely had a bad meal in South Africa. And not only is the meal great, but the cost is great and the service is great as well. Kind of changing tact a bit, my 7th point is that South Africa has a fairly high crime rate, and you will no doubt have this preconception before you leave. I always say that South Africa needs to get better at doing its own PR, because people have a certain perception. Like when I tell people I spend time in South Africa, the first question they always ask me is, oh yeah, but Rob, is it safe? But yeah, so I have to admit that South Africa does have a high crime rate, especially in some of the more urban areas that you're probably not likely to go to as a tourist. So be careful and take the necessary precautions that you would take anywhere. Now, a lot of the crime is driven by poverty, and that leads me on to the next point in a moment. But I also want to say at this point that we've never experienced personally in 10 trips any form of crime, but that doesn't mean we won't. And we are also really careful. So we, for example, if we're at traffic lights, we'll keep our car, we'll always make sure the car doors are locked. We'll keep the windows up and put the air conditioning on. We won't leave phones lying around. We're not leaving cameras around our necks and all the obvious touristy things that you probably wouldn't do in your own country, but you might do when you're on vacation. So anyway, the crime leads me on to my next point, which is you cannot avoid this, a striking contrast between affluence and poverty in South Africa. And you're going to see that as, for example, if you fly into Cape Town and you drive from Cape Town to the centre of Cape Town, which is about a 30-minute drive, you're going to pass through the vast amounts of townships on the way in, and so you can't avoid the poverty. You will see people begging on the streets, and my advice and what I do, and I know people will have different opinions on this, is that when someone starts asking me for money, I just ignore them, and I don't give them money, because there's other ways that you can donate to charities out there where you know that the money is going to be put to a good cause. And when someone is begging, you don't know whether they are truly trying to buy food or whether they are using it for drugs or for alcohol. That's my perspective on this. As I say, other people will have a different view on that one. Point 9 is be aware that there's this thing called load shedding in South Africa, and you don't really get told about this. You don't even see it on an Airbnb booking very rarely, because obviously people don't want to advertise the fact that South Africa fundamentally has a massive issue of supply and demand when it comes to electricity. So they call it load shedding, but we would call it power cuts. And so if you download the Eskom, ESCOM app before you go, then whatever area you're staying in, you'll be able to log onto the app and it will show you when the load shedding is happening that day. And during the summer, quite honestly, it tends to happen about 3 times a day. So you might find that you've got no power between 6:30 and 8:30 in the morning, between 12 and 2 in the afternoon, and between 6 and 8 in the evening. So you want to be mindful about that. Now, a lot of hotels and restaurants have their own either generators or their own battery supplies, so you may well not even notice any load shedding. But if you're staying in an Airbnb, one question to ask the owners of the Airbnb before you book is, does this building suffer from load shedding? Because as I say, they won't advertise that necessarily in the listing because they don't want you to know that there are actually power cuts in South Africa. But some of them will have their own inverters and batteries or their own generators, so they'll say no, they won't. And actually some apartments don't have load shedding because of their proximity to, for example, a hospital or a bus station or a government building, where obviously they need power 24/7. So make sure you investigate that. The reason load shedding happens is because the Eskom government-owned power supply hasn't been invested in properly since the 1970s, and of course there is lots of corruption in South Africa, so money's disappeared, and so they're still driven by coal and lack of investment. And you can go and Google this and learn more about it than I can tell you, but just know that the issue is that there is, in the summer especially when people are running their air conditioning, there's too much demand and not enough supply, and so each area has load shedding at different points of the day, and you want to make sure that you are at least mindful of that, or you're staying somewhere that doesn't suffer. And more, especially in the Western Cape, people are investing in renewable energy such as solar panels and batteries and inverters and obviously generators, so that there is no load shedding. Now, my 10th point to know before you travel to South Africa is that it would be remiss of me not to touch upon the influence of apartheid on modern day South Africa. Apartheid ended on the 4th of May 1990, and to be honest, South Africa is still trying to find its feet, like trying to find the equilibrium between balance and equality. But it's such a fascinating history. It's a terrible history, but a fascinating history, one that you should learn about because it's extremely, well, it's just good for us to know more, right? And it's also very moving. So try and visit museums, and of course visit Robben Island in Cape Town where Nelson Mandela was held, the Apartheid Museum in Johannesburg. We visited the capture site in Durban where Nelson Mandela was actually captured, and it was super moving, and I'll put a link to the video above if you want to go and watch that video. And you can also visit the battlefield route in KwaZulu-Natal. These places provide much deeper insights into South Africa's complex history and its cultural heritage. So you should absolutely do that because it's fascinating, and it's also staggering as well, to be quite honest, that this is modern history. This isn't history from centuries ago, it's histories from a few decades ago. Last point I wanted to touch upon, because some of my friends asked me this, is LGBTQ rights in South Africa, because people obviously have those concerns when they are travelling around the world. And South Africa's post-apartheid constitution was the first in the world to outlaw discrimination based on sexual orientation. And South Africa was the 5th country in the world and the first in Africa to legalize same-sex marriage. So, in a nutshell, South Africa is a very gay, friendly, and safe place for the LGBTQ community. So do consider that if you are traveling there and you're part of that community. Okay, so let me now move on to 5 do's and 5 don'ts when you visit South Africa. So I'm going to start with the do's, and my number 1 do is that you should engage with both urban and rural landscapes. So I imagine that you probably would visit Cape Town and you'll maybe go on a safari in Kruger or Johannesburg, but do explore beyond those big cities and experience some of the rural areas for a much broader understanding of South African culture and lifestyle. Some of our favourite places we have ever visited have been these little middle of nowhere towns that we've discovered on our drive, and they've been magical places that we wanted to go back to. So Pilgrim's Rest up in Mpumalanga, in places like Gordon's Bay on the way to Hermanus, just these little places that we have driven through that we thought, oh, let's stop there. Stanford, just past Hermanus, is another place that's worth visiting, and these are tiny little towns, but fascinating places to visit nonetheless. So that's number 1, do engage in both urban and rural landscapes. Second of all, if you want to learn more about South Africa's culture and its apartheid, then go and do a township tour, but do it with either a trusted guide or a GMO so that the money is going back to those townships. They offer a unique perspective on African life and African culture, but obviously we need to approach them with sensitivity and respect. They're not a museum exhibit, they are places where people live. So I would choose a tour that's led by local residents or a GMO and get some really honest insights without turning communities into spectacles. So that's number 2, visit a township. Number 3 is visit the local artisan markets and the craft markets. Look out for the farmers markets and also look out for local festivals that may well be happening or almost happen every weekend in Cape Town during the summer months. And then go and buy from local craftspeople, because you are supporting the local community and you are also supporting the continuation of these local authentic cultural crafts. And so this, again, you can learn a lot and get into great conversations with people. So look at those crafts and also look at local foods as well. Number 4, if you're wanting to move around and you don't want to hire a car, then do use Uber or the local kind of Uber equivalent of Bolt. Download the apps before you get there. They are safe and they are super cheap, and there is lots of them around. And again, we are supporting local people's livelihoods. And I would always say use Uber or Bolt over just picking up a cab. We did this one time. We were down at the V&A waterfront, which is the big shopping area in Cape Town, and we had got an Uber there. We were staying in Camps Bay, which is about a half-hour journey, and we decided just to pick up a cab in the local cab rank. On the way back, we jumped in this cab and the guy took us all over the place, and we knew where we were going. I said to him, what are you doing? Why are you going this way? And he was obviously just trying to rack his meter up. So that's the first and last time we ever did that. And of course, when you use Uber or Bolt, you've got an app, you know how much it's going to cost. You can see the route they're taking you on, so they're not going to rip you off. So don't be afraid of doing that. And if you're going to drive, well, look, renting a car is easy. South Africans drive on the left-hand side of the road like we do in the UK, and all signposts are written in English, so it is super easy. And if I'm quite honest right now, generally the roads in the Western Cape are way better than the roads in the UK. And if you're driving in Cape Town, well, you have to have your wits about you because cars are zooming all over the place. But, you know, I drive in Cape Town all the time. It's pretty straightforward. It's a law to wear a seatbelt at all time. It's illegal to use your mobile phone while you're driving. And all drivers must have a valid driving license from their country of residence. So if you do rent a car, make sure you adhere to those. Make sure you've got your driving license with you, and obviously have your rental documentation available as well in case you are stopped by the police for whatever reason. They have speed cameras out in South Africa just like they do everywhere else, so do also make sure you adhere to the speed limit. And my 5th do is when you're arranging your visit, try and stay in local B&Bs because they are so lovely. The quality is amazing. The hosts are usually super friendly and super knowledgeable about the local area. And of course, you are supporting the local community. So we never stay in big hotels. If I'm there for the long term, we would rent an Airbnb. But when we're traveling around, we will seek out these little B&Bs. And honestly, the quality of accommodation is so much better. The quality of the amazing breakfast we have in B&Bs, and the hosts are super helpful, and they will tell you a lot about the local area you're in. So I would highly recommend using local B&Bs when you are booking your trip to South Africa. Okay, that's my 5 do's. Now let's wrap this video up by talking about the 5 don'ts of traveling to South Africa. So first of all, and this won't be a surprising one, don't take your safety for granted. It is amazing that when we're on holiday and the sun is shining, how kind of common sense can go out the window. So make sure that you stash your valuables away. You haven't got your camera around your neck. That if you are carrying a backpack, don't carry it with one shoulder, put it on both shoulders so that someone can't nip by you. Same with a handbag, put it over across your body. So be aware of your surroundings. In tourist heavy areas, there are obviously opportunistic people that are looking for an easy target. So don't be that easy target. And as I say, keep your valuables out of sight when you're driving. Don't have your wallet or your phone just sitting on the seat. Keep your windows done up. One trick that has happened to us a few times is that you'll stop at a traffic light and there'll be someone pointing at your headlight trying to tell you that there's a problem with your headlight, and they want you to wind your window down so they can reach in and grab your phone. So I would just keep my doors locked, keep my windows up, and ignore people like that. You will see lots of people at traffic lights who are trying to sell you the big issue or a hat or a pair of sunglasses. They're just trying to make a living. They're not about to rob you. So be careful with your safety. Which leads on to the second point, which I've already made really, which is don't flash your valuables in public. Like I said, don't take expensive jewelry or expensive watches with you. I wouldn't have large amounts of cash. As I said earlier, you don't need it because everywhere takes credit cards, so you want a small amount of cash, but don't take it all in your wallet in one go. Keep your wallet out of sight, keep your cards locked, windows up, and you will be fine. Thirdly is don't venture into isolated areas alone. I know I talked about visiting little towns, but you can do some planning on them. Or if you're driving on a touristy route like the garden route and you want to discover a little town, it's going to be pretty safe. But if you're driving into the middle of nowhere and it's dark, then you are kind of asking for trouble. So I would avoid going to really secluded beaches or trails or neighborhood without some local advice first of all. And I wouldn't do any of that at night. In fact, when I'm there on my own, which I am there a lot on my own, I won't particularly walk around on my own at night. Not because I think I'm going to get mugged or anything, but just because, well, basically taking an Uber costs next to nothing. And it's just a precaution that's worth taking. And also don't assume that all areas are the same. There are certain parts that are going to be super safe, and there are certain parts are going to not be so safe. So just get some local advice, but don't be scared of exploring, but get some local advice and some local guidance. Number 4 is don't forget to tip appropriately. There is a local tipping culture in South Africa. Tipping is customary, and service workers, like someone who's working at a cafe or a restaurant, are often relying on tips to supplement their basic salary. So I would suggest a tip of around about 10 to 15% in restaurants, bars, and if you're in an Uber and you've had a good journey, then give a tip once you've finished your journey, again, of 10 to 15%. And if you've got housekeeping, then again, you can give them a tip daily or a tip at the end of your trip. And my final don't in this list of 5 don'ts is don't dismiss any health precautions. So make sure that you have researched the area they're going to visit to see if you need any vaccinations such as malaria before you go. And so make sure you've done your research and get those malaria treatments before you go. In the UK, they'll be a lot cheaper than having to buy it over the counter in South Africa. Now, most of South Africa is malaria free, but if you are visiting the northeastern KwaZulu-Natal part or parts of Mpumalanga and Limpopo, then you will want to have a course of malaria tablets before you travel. But if you're doing a safari in parts of Kruger or the Western Cape, then you won't need malaria tablets. But again, ask your travel agent, or if you're booking the trip yourself like we do, then just do your research online. Otherwise, you don't need to worry too much about any other kinds of vaccinations. And by and large, water is safe to drink out the tap. But if you don't feel safe about doing that, then buy bottled water, which is very cheap as well. I think by and large, when you go to South Africa, you get a sense, especially in the Western Cape, which is where Cape Town is, that it's a first world, highly developed country. And then you have power cuts, of course, and you realise that it isn't quite that. But by and large, in terms of health and safety, it's pretty good. Just do your research before you go. So there you go. That's my 11 things that I wish I'd known before I travelled to South Africa. 5 things you absolutely must do, and 5 things that you shouldn't do and you should be aware of. And I just want to say in summary about this that we absolutely love South Africa. It is our favourite place on earth, and the continent of Africa as well is a place that we are slowly exploring, as we went to Zimbabwe and Botswana this year before we headed down to South Africa. It is a place of contrast, both in terms of its landscapes and its people and its food, and it's somewhere that everybody should visit at least once in their life, and I highly encourage you to do that. There's a reason why, like, James and I love traveling and we very rarely go back to the same place, but there's a reason why we've been to South Africa 10 times and why I'm planning my 3-month stay there for the beginning of next year. So I'd really encourage you to go and plan your trip. And if you've got any questions, or if there are any other tips that I didn't mention in this video, then do leave a comment in the comments below, because I love hearing from the subscribers. And obviously I haven't covered everything, and maybe you don't even agree with some of the things that I've said. So if that's the case, do leave a comment. And of course, make sure you've given this video a like if you enjoyed it and found it useful, and make sure you hit the subscribe button so you're alerted every time a new video is released. But other than that, I hope you have a great time planning your next vacation, and we will see you next time as we head out on the road again.